Hey everybody, Joe here. Thanks for watching. We're going to have some fun with some light painting, some burning and dodging, and we're going to take this image right here, which is from Valley of the Gods, near Bluff, Utah. It's about, maybe a half an hour north of Monument Valley. It's a great place, one of my favorite places to photograph, by the way, out in the Four Corners region. So before we go into Photoshop to take care of the light painting part, let's get the image straightened out first in Lightroom. Basically what I'm doing is I'm using Lightroom as my Adobe Camera Raw, and the develop module in Lightroom basically is Adobe Camera Raw. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the white balance. It's a little bit too yellow. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. Let's bring up the tint a little bit, maybe around there. And it needs a little more exposure. It's a little dark, and we can see from the histogram up here that it is dark. So let's bring it up. I'm going to go about maybe half a stop or so, maybe about right there. Now that looks a little too light, but stay tuned. Also, the shadows on the shaded side of the features are kind of dark, so let's bring up the shadows quite a bit. Let's open them up. Yes, the image looks flat, but stay tuned. Now we're going to come down to presence. I'm going to add texture, 30 points or so. A little less on clarity. Let's do 25 is good. We can add a little dehaze too, because there seems to be a slight bit of dehaze, just a little bit, like 6 points or so. Yeah, something like that is good. Now, one thing that's going on here also is this is using the Adobe color profile. And unless you're creating custom profiles, unfortunately, that's all you've got. But the color is off here. And there's probably two color temperatures going on, which is probably part of the problem. So this is still, the color is off. It should be a little more saturated, and we can do that as well. But I created a custom profile out here with the Nissi circular polarizer filter, which is right here. Now, I'm not going to cover that today, but if you look on my YouTube channel, you'll see some videos about using the filter and about creating custom profiles. So let's see what happens when we apply the custom profile for the area. And look what just happened to the color. So here's what Adobe is giving us, which isn't really very good. And here is the custom color profile for the scene. Looks much more real. All right. I think it could use maybe a little bit more saturation. Let's bring that up a little bit. Yeah, I'm thinking about right there. Also, I have a spot. You can see it right here. Let's zoom in on it. There it is right there. So let's go to our spot removal tool. Make it a little bit smaller. We'll click on that and let Lightroom get rid of that. Now, something happened here, and unfortunately this is something that does happen with circular polarizers a lot, depending on the angle you're shooting. Now, the sun is obviously over here, and it's coming this way, yet the sky is dark here. So I need to lighten that. Although, and here's what's interesting, while I was here this morning, when I followed the road around a little further and came to another formation, these pretty little, just really subtle little clouds showed up. In fact, here they are. This is what showed up, and I think some of you might think it's cheating, but I'm going to add a little bit of wispy cloud in there just to add some interest. So before we get to that, let's assume we're not going to do that. Let's get a graduated filter. And I'm going to start here and just bring it way down. And I'm going to bring the exposure up on this to even out that sky a bit, because it has just gone too dark. If anything, if the sun's over here, the sky should be brighter here than darker. All right, so let's get done with that. Now, I see some compositional issues going on as well. I purposely, I took this shot probably half a dozen times with the road in a different position. And I find that the road here, going right around that corner, is actually leading you to the main feature. So looking pretty good. I'm more concerned about the shadows up in here, and the shadows as we scroll through are looking pretty good. But we have a lot of room on the right. So I'm actually going to bring up the exposure a little more. I'd rather have it a little extra light, because we're going to do our burning and dodging to fix that. All right, so there we go. Now, in preparation, since I kind of know I really want to see what it looks like, I'm going to open this file that it's now ready to be burned and dodged, to be light painted, and I'm going to hold down Command and add that, and I'm going to come up to Photo, not edit in Photoshop, but open as layers in Photoshop, so I have the sky should I decide to use it. Okay, so here you can see, here's our sky and our image. I'm just going to hide the sky for now. We don't need to see that. And so what do we need to do? Yes, I am going to crop this later. There's far too much on the bottom because this is the subject. These are the stars. This, by the way, is called Castle Butte, and this is called Sitting Hen Butte. I guess this is the sitting hen right there. But the physical weight of the road leading in is a little too strong. We're going to need to crop off some of the bottom so that this thing isn't physically larger than our stars of the show. Also, since there is nothing going on in the sky, we can bring that down a little bit too. But I'm going to save that for the very end because we'll save our cropping actually back in Lightroom because that'll give us the flexibility to change it depending on what kind of frame we want to put it in. So here's our bottom layer. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. So I'm going to create new. And I'm going to, and this is an optional step, by the way, I'm going to fill this with 50% gray. And you see that's actually an option. And there's a reason for it. Because we're going to change over here, under layers, the blending mode. We're going to change it from normal to overlay. And now you can see if I turn this on and off, you can't see anything happen. And overlay is a contrast adjustment layer. And anything that's 50% gray is transparent to the layer below. Anywhere I paint with black, in fact, let me get a brush. Make a nice big brush. We'll paint it like 40%. Anywhere I paint with black, you can see darkens the layer below. And if I switch to white, anywhere I paint with white, lightens the layer below. 40% was obviously too strong, but I just wanted you to see what happens. So let's undo that. And let's take a look and see where are the issues. Again, our goal is to send the viewer here. And actually above this, since I still think this is a little too desaturated, I am going to do a saturation layer. Let's bring the saturation up. And I'm not concerned about the sky. I'm trying to get our features here the right color and saturation because I've been here a lot. I know what these things look like. And that's more like what these rocks look like. So that's good. So let's again come back to our burn. In fact, I'm going to call this burn and dodge, just so we know what it is. And again, the gray part, filling it with gray was an optional step. The advantage of it, however, is that when you paint with white, you can see where you've painted. If you don't fill it with gray first, you can't see the white areas you painted in. So again, compositionally, we want the viewer's eyes to go to the features. What is stopping you? Well, the foreground is too bright. This all in through here is too bright. So let's switch to black. And I'm just going to paint at 10%. And to get to 10%, I just hit 1 on my keyboard. I hit 4, I get 40%. 2, I get 20%. 1, I get 10%. And let's just start painting on this. And what we're after is, we don't necessarily want to make it dark per se, but we want to take out some of the kind of extreme highlights. And make it a little smaller. And I don't want anybody going off the edge of the picture. So let's also darken, let's actually darken this foreground here. And then a little bit of this formation over here. And I think we're making some progress here. I'm also going to darken the base of this butte a little bit. All right. Now, does it look like I did anything really? Not much, but watch what happens when we turn this on and off. Look at the difference about where your eye goes now. Now you're not so attracted to the foreground. Now this becomes more interesting. Now let's get white. Let's flip it around. And let's create ourselves some highlights. Let's brighten up these highlights a little bit so that, again, the viewer goes to where we want them to go. We want them to see this feature here. And we can also cheat. Now you would want them to follow the road, but I'm actually going to cut through the brush a little bit. And I'm going to create paths through that brush. I'm going to further darken here a little bit more. And now actually this is going to get cut off from our crop, so I'm not worried about it. And let's darken the back there. All right. Now you might know that there are burn and dodge tools in Photoshop, but I find they just don't work as well. Lost my layer. Okay, there we go. All right, so again, if we turn this layer on and off, look at the difference. Look at how much more interesting this is, and there's less of this. Just a simple tool, but man, does it make a huge difference on the image. All right, Actually, I don't know that I necessarily need to do anything more to the image. Sometimes the answer is to just stop. By the way, if you find this a little too strong, you have two options. One, you can bring the opacity of the layer down. So I could bring this down and you can see at what point there's nothing, there's halfway, there's full. You can also change the blending mode from overlay to soft light, which is the same effect but with a lower contrast. And you can turn that on and off and see if that does enough for you. Me personally, I happen to like the full overlay. As I turn that on and off, yeah, to me that works better. And I might even split the difference and come down just a little bit. I'll come down to 85%. And yes, I like that. So there's our burn and dodge. While I'm here, okay, I can't resist. I want to see what these clouds on this layer look like in this image. So let's take a look. First thing I need to do is select the sky. So this is an easy sky to select. So I'm just going to get the magic wand. I'll use the default settings of 32. There are no holes really, so I can leave it on contiguous and just do a click. And it gets most of it. Hold down the shift key to get the darker blue areas that it did not get. And there's a little spot I missed, so let's just get the lasso tool, hold down the shift key, and I can just basically draw a big thing around there. So as we come in close, let's take a look on the edges and see how good a job it did. And we see there is some noise in this sky, and we have a few little dots here. And we're going to fix that another way. But let's just get rid of the ones that are obvious. Okay. All right, so before we go any further, let's save this. So we'll go up to Select, Save Selection, and I'm just going to call it Sky. And now I'm going to come up to here. Let me deselect this. And I'm basically going to select the whole thing. I'll just hit All, Command A, Command C to copy, or Control on a Windows machine. And then I'm going to hide this. And I'm going to bring back our selection. So we go to Select, Load Selection, and click on Channel and change it to Sky. And then there's our sky back. Now our sky, our cloud, is sitting on the clipboard, so we can just go to Edit, Paste Special, Paste Into, and there's our sky. So now we can hit the V key to move things around, and we can see, okay. Now, again, you can see the difference with the polarizer. Look how light the sky is here, but the polarizer made it go way too dark over here. I want this sky to match this color blue over in here. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get the zoom tool, and we're just going to zoom on this interface. And we're going to go to Channels. So click on the picture, the icon of the red, hit Levels, which is Command or Control L, and we're going to bring the middle slider over to the left until the one with the sky matches the tone of the old sky. And when you have difference in textures here, I find that it helps if you just kind of squint at the screen so you can't see the details. There we go. That's pretty good. We'll do the same thing for green. Command or Control L. Again, squint at the screen so that it's kind of out of focus. And until they kind of disappear about right there. And then lastly, blue, the same thing. Squint, squint, until that disappears. So basically what's happening is we're adjusting the red, green, and blue channels separately. And if the red, green, and blue channels match on each of the three, then the colors will match. So now if we go back to our full image, we can see that in the middle here, this is where we were going for. Now it matches, and by the way, doesn't the sky look like it belongs there? So let's get the V key and decide, well, where do we want the sky? I think maybe about right there. Have some of the clouds coming through there. We lost a little bit over here on the right, so I'm going to hit Command T, and I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit. And there we go. And again, sometimes you might think that's cheating. In my defense, I will say that that was obviously a cloud from right around the corner, but it just makes the image so much more interesting. Now, that said, there's still too much of the image, so let's bring this back into Lightroom. So I'm just going to simply hit Save, and that will save the image and put it right back into Lightroom next to our original. So let's tab over to Lightroom. All right, now here's our new image loaded in. Now it's still a little bit too light, but that's okay. You're always better off having your images light because that's easy to fix later. In fact, we're going to do that. I'm actually going to bring the exposure down a little bit, just a smidge. I'm going to increase the contrast a little bit. And I'm going to go to Effects and add a -12 or so vignette to that. And now let's look at the cropping. I mentioned that the road is just too big in here, so let's bring this down a bit. So here's our crop tool. Let's bring this up. I'm thinking, let's see, do I want to include this little rock here, or is it a distraction? Yeah, I think it's actually a slight distraction. So I'm going to get rid of the rock, and I'm going to bring down on the top as well. This really kind of has a panoramic feel to it. It's a very panoramic place if you ever go out here. And I think probably something about like that. So now we've got the path of the road coming around the corner leading in. And I think it actually still needs a little bit more contrast. And let's bring the highlights down a little bit too. Now this is actually, strangely enough, now this is correct lighting because obviously the sun's coming from the upper left and coming across to cast these shadows. I'm actually now finding that with the new sky, a little bit too bright. So let's get a graduated tool. Let's bring that down. I'm just going to bring the exposure down just a little bit, just to take a little bit of that extra brightness because again, your eye goes to the brightest thing and it has a tendency to be a distraction. All right, so I think we're done. So if we look at our before, so here's the before image. This is the file that we started with after our basic edits, and here is where we ended up. I find it a much more interesting image. There are some people who are offended by the fact of new sky. Actually, you know what? I'm going to slightly agree for a second here because I forgot to do something. The sky down at the horizon is actually maybe a little bit too bright, or too dark rather. So let's come back off of here. I'm going to select the sky. Actually, I'm going to get a brush, a nice big brush. I'm going to have auto mask on. I'm going to turn on my overlay, and I'm going to get a really big brush so I can see where I'm painting. Yeah, so I'm going to select the bottom half of the sky, hit O to toggle that off, and I'm going to bring up the exposure just a little bit, just to lighten it as it goes down to the horizon, which I think will look much more realistic. Actually, it was about a half a stop. There we go. All right, yes, that looks so much better. Now it looks more realistic because the sky as it gets down the horizon should be lighter. All right, let's look at that full screen. Okay, much better. Now it works for me. So you can see we've got the road that's following around. The road actually comes right past here, actually makes a turn, if you're ever here, makes a turn in front of this butte, comes all the way down here and behind there. This is a phenomenal place. If you ever find yourself out in the Four Corners area, Valley of the Gods is definitely a place not to miss. So, yes, we went far afield from our initial burning and dodging, but I wanted you to see how you can do it in Photoshop. Can you burn and dodge in Lightroom? Yes, but Photoshop does give you more control, and you really get to see what it is that you're doing. So if I have some serious burning and dodging to do where I want that control, I want it on a layer so I can play with the lightness and darkness of it. It just gives you that much more flexibility. And hope you're not offended by the new sky, but to me, it really happens to finish off this image. That's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you online again soon. Have a great time, everybody. Bye-bye.